Hey guys, this is week 3 of reading, writing, and vocabulary. Today is Wednesday, April the 22nd, and we are going to go over chapter 6 of The Giver. Hopefully by now you guys have got a jump on your 6 vocabulary words that I assigned you yesterday. All right. So to go over what happened in chapter 5, Jonas was having a dream about giving a female friend, a bath, and he was starting to have what this society calls the stirrings, which is basically he's reaching puberty and feeling some physical attraction toward this girl. And when he tells about this during the dinner ritual, where you tell about your day, he explains that he was wanting to bathe her, and his mother and father looked at each other and said, "Oh, it's time to start giving Jonas the pills." All right. So in this society, you're not allowed to choose, who you're attracted to or who you want to be with. So as soon as you start feeling those kinds of stirrings, this society gives you pills to suppress or stop those feelings. All right. So now Jonas is taking pills so that he doesn't feel physical attraction toward, that girl or anyone else in society. All right. So that takes us to chapter 6. So let's just jump right into it. All right, here we go. "Lily, please hold still," Mother said again. Lily, standing in front of the door, fidgeted impatiently. "I can tie it myself," she complained. "I always have." "I know that," Mother replied, straightening the hair ribbons on the girl's braids. "But I also know that they consistently come loose, and more often than not, they're dangling down your back by the mid-afternoon. Today, at least, we want them to stay neatly tied and to stay neatly tied." "I don't like the hair ribbons. I'm glad I only have to wear them for 1 more year," Lily said irritably. "Next year I get my bicycle too," she added more cheerfully. There are good things each year," Jonas reminded her. "This year you get to start your volunteer hours. And remember last year when you became a 7, you were so happy to get your front button jacket." The little girl nodded and looked down at herself, at the jacket in its large row of buttons that designated her as a 7. 4s, 5s, and 6s, they all wore jackets that fastened down in the back so that they would have to help each other and learn interdependence. The front button jacket was the first sign of independence, the first visible symbol of growing up. The bicycle at 9 would be a powerful emblem of them moving gradually into the community, away from the protective family unit. Lily grinned and wriggled away from her mother. "At this year, you get an assignment," she said to Jonas in an excited voice. "I hope you get pilot and that you take me flying." "Oh, sure I will," said Jonas. "And I'll get a special little parachute that fits you, and I'll take you up, maybe 20,000 feet, and I'll go ahead and open the door and—" "Jonas," Mother warned. "I was only joking," Jonas groaned. "I don't want to be a pilot anyway. If I were to get a pilot, I would appeal." "Come on," Mother said. She gave Lily's ribbons a final tug. "Jonas, are you ready? Did you take your pill? I want to get a good seat at the auditorium." She prodded Lily toward the front door, and Jonas followed. It was a short ride to the auditorium, Lily waving to her friends from the back seat of her mother's bicycle. Jonas stowed his bicycle beside Mother and made his way through the throng to find the group. The entire community attended the ceremony each year. For the parents, it meant 2 days holiday from work, and they got to sit together in the large hall. Children sat with their groups that they went with, one by one, on the stage. Father, though, he would not join Mother in the audience right away. For the earliest ceremony, the naming, the nurturers brought the new children to the stage. Jonas, from his place in the balcony with the 11s, searched the auditorium for a glimpse of his father. It wasn't at all hard to spot the nurturers section at the front, coming from where all the wails and howls of the new children sat squirming on the nurturers' laps. At every other public ceremony, the audience was silent and attentive, vocab word. But once a year, they all smiled indulgently, vocab word, at the commotion from the little ones wanting to receive their names and families. Jonas finally caught his father's eye and waved. Father grinned and waved back, and then held up one hand of the new child on his lap, making him wave too. It wasn't Gabriel. Gabriel was back at the nurturing center today, being cared for by the night crew. He had been given an unusual and special reprieve from the committee and granted an additional year of nurturing before his naming and placement. Father had gone before the committee with a plea on behalf of Gabriel, who had not yet gained the appropriate weight to his days of life, nor had he begun to sleep soundly enough during the night to be placed with a family unit. Normally, such a new child would be labeled inadequate, vocab word, and released from the community. Instead, as a result of Father's plea, Gabriel had been labeled uncertain and given an additional year. He would continue to be nurtured at the center and would spend his night with Jonas's family unit. Each family member, including Lily, would be required to sign a pledge that they would not become attached to his little temporary guest, and that they would relinquish, vocab word, him from without protest and or appeal when he was assigned to his family unit in next year's ceremony. At least Jonas thought, after Gabriel was placed next year, that they would still see him often enough that he would be part of the community. If he was released, they would never see him again, ever. Those who were released, even as new children, were sent elsewhere and never returned to the community. Father had not had to release a single new child this year, so Gabriel would have been what would have represented a failure and real sadness. Even Jonas, though he didn't hover over the little one in the way that Lily and his father did, was glad that Gabe had not been released. The first ceremony began right on time, and Jonas watched one after another as the newborns, the new child, were given their names and handed by the nurturers to their new family units. For some, it was the first child, but many came to the stage accompanied by another child, beaming with pride to receive another little brother or sister, the way Jonas had when he was about to be 5. Asher poked Jonas's arm. "Remember when we got Philippia? He asked in a loud whisper. Jonas nodded. It had only been a year. Asher's parents had waited quite a long time before they applied for a second child. Maybe, Jonas suspected, that they had been so exhausted by Asher's lively foolishness that they needed more time. 2 of their group, Fiona and another female named Thea, were missing temporarily, waiting with their parents to receive their new children. But it was rare that there was such an age gap between children in a family unit. When her family ceremony was completed, Fiona took the seat that had been saved for her in the row ahead of Asher and Jonas. She turned and whispered to them, "He's cute, but I don't like his name very much." She made a face and giggled. Fiona's new brother had been named Bruno. It wasn't a great name, Jonas thought. Not like Gabriel, for example, but it was okay. The audience applause, which was enthusiastic, vocab word, at each naming, rose in an exuberant swell when one parental pair, glowing with pride, took a male new child and heard his name was Caleb. This new Caleb was a replacement child. The couple had lost their first Caleb, a cheerful little 4. Loss of a child was very, very rare. The community took extraordinarily safe, vocab word, the community was extraordinarily safe, each citizen watchful and protective of the children. But somehow the first little Caleb had wandered away unnoticed and fallen into the river. Sorry, I lost my place. There we go. The entire community had performed the ceremony of loss together, murmuring the name Caleb throughout the entire day, less and less frequently, in softer and softer volume as the long somber of the day went on. So the little force seemed to fade away gradually from everyone's consciousness. Now, at this special naming, the community performed the brief murmur of replacement ceremony, or repeating the name for the first time since the loss, softly and slowly at first, and then faster and with greater volume as the couple stood on the stage with the new child sleeping in the mother's arms. It was as if the first Caleb were returning. Another new child was given the name Roberto. And Jonas remembered that Roberto, the old, had been released only a few weeks before. But there was no murmur of replacement ceremony for this new little Roberto. Release was not the same as loss. He sat politely through the ceremonies 2 and 3 and 4, increasingly bored as he was each year. Then a break for a midday meal served outdoors, and back again to their seats for the 4s, the 5s, the 6s, the 7s, and finally the last of the day's ceremonies, the 8s. Jonas watched and cheered as Lily marched proudly to the stage, becoming an 8, and received an identifying jacket that she would wear this year. This one with smaller buttons and for the first time pockets, indicating that she was mature enough now to keep track of her own belongings. She stood solemnly, listening to the speech of firm instructions and responsibilities of the 8s, and doing volunteer hours for the first time. But Jonas could see that Lily, though she seemed attentive, was looking longingly at the row of gleaming bicycles, which she would be presented with tomorrow morning to the 9s, which would be presented tomorrow morning to the 9s. Next year, Lily Billy, Jonas thought. It was an exhausting day, and even Gabriel, retrieved in the basket from the nurturing center, slept soundly that night. Finally, it was the morning of the ceremony of the 12s. Now Father sat beside Mother in the audience. Jonas could see them applauding dutifully as the 9s, one by one, wheeled their new bikes, each with its gleaming name tag attached to the back toward the center stage. He knew that his parents cringed a little, as he did, when Fritz, who lived in the dwelling next door to theirs, received his bike and almost immediately bumped into the podium with it. Fritz was a very awkward child who had been summoned for chastisement again and again. His transgressions were small ones, always. Shoes on the wrong feet, homework was misplaced, failure to study adequately for a quiz. But each error reflected negatively on his parents' guidance and infringed on the community's sense of order and success. Jonas and his family had not been looking forward to Fritz receiving his bicycle, which they realized would probably too often be dropped on the front sidewalk instead of wheeled neatly to its port like it should be. Finally, the 9s were all settled in their seats, each having wheeled a bicycle outside, but when it waited for its owner by the end of the day. Everyone always chuckled and made small jokes about when the 9s rode home for the first time. Want me to show you how to ride? An older friend would call. I know you've never been on the bike before, but invariably, the grinning 9s, who, in technical violation of the rule, had been practicing secretly for weeks, would mount and ride off to the perfect balance, training wheels, never touching the ground. Then the 10s. Jonas never found the ceremony of the 10s particularly interesting, only time-consuming, as each child's hair was snipped neatly into its distinguished haircut. Females lost their braids at 10, and males, too, relinquished their long childish hair and took the more manly short-style haircut, which exposed their ears. Laborers moved quickly to the stage with brooms and swept away the mounds of discarded hair. Jonas could see the parents of the new 10 stirring and murmuring, and he knew that this evening in many of the dwellings they would be snipping and straightening the hastily haircuts, trimming them into a neater line. 11s, it seemed, a short time ago that Jonas had undergone the ceremony of the 11s, but he remembered that it was not one of the more interesting ones either. By 11, one was only wanting to be 12. It was simply a marking of time with no meaningful changes. There was new clothing, different undergarments for the females whose bodies were beginning to change, longer trousers for the males with an especially shaped pocket for the small calculator that they would need for school that year. But those were simply presented in packages without any accompanying speech. It was the break for the middle day. Jonas realized he was actually getting hungry. He and his group mates congregated by the tables in the front of the auditorium and then took the packaged food. Yesterday, there had been a merriment at lunch, a lot of teasing and energy, but today the group stood anxiously, separate from the other children. Jonas watched the new 9s gravitate toward their waiting bicycles each one admiring his or her own name tag. He saw the 10 stroking their new shortened hair and the females shaking their heads to feel the unaccustomed lightness without the heavy braids that they had worn for so long. I heard about a guy who was absolutely certain he was going to be assigned an engineer, Asher muttered as he ate, and instead they gave him a sanitation laborer. He went on the next day, jumped into the river, swam across, and joined the next community he came to. Nobody ever saw him again. Jonas laughed. Somebody made that story up, Ash. It's not true. My father said he heard that same story when he was a 12 all those years ago. But Asher wasn't reassured. He was eyeing the river where it was visible to see the auditorium. I can't even swim very well, he said. My swimming instructor said I don't have the right boyishness or buoyancy or something. Yes, buoyancy, Jonas corrected him. Well, whatever. The point is I would sink in. Anyway, Jonas pointed out, have you ever known anyone, anyone really for sure, Asher, not just heard a story about it, who actually joined another community? Well, no, Asher admitted reluctantly. But you can, it says in the rules. If you don't fit in, you can apply for elsewhere and you can apply to be released. My mother said that once, about 10 years ago, someone applied and was gone the next day. Then he chuckled. She told me that was because I was driving her crazy, and she threatened to help me apply to go somewhere else. She was only joking, of course. I know, but it was true, what she said, that someone did that once. She said that it was really true. Here today and gone tomorrow. Never seen again. Never even a ceremony of release. Nothing. Jonas shrugged. It didn't really worry him. How could someone not fit in? This community was so meticulously ordered, and the choices were all so carefully made. Even the matching spouses were given such weighty consideration that sometimes an adult who applied to receive the spouse waited months or even years before a match would be approved and announced. All of the factors, disposition, energy level, intelligence, interests, all corresponded to have a perfect match. Jonas's mother, for example, had higher intelligence than her father, but her father had the calmer disposition. They balanced each other out nicely. Their match, made in all the matches, had been monitored by the community of elders for 3 years before they could apply for children, and it was always a successful one. Like the matching of spouses and the naming placement of new children, the assignments were scrupulously thought out by the community of elders. He was certain that his assignment, whatever it would be, and Asher's too, would be a perfect fit for them. He only wished that the midday break would conclude, the audience would re-enter the auditorium, and that the suspense would end. As if in answer to his unspoken wish, the signal came, and the crowd began to move toward the doors. All right, that is the end of that chapter. That's a pretty long chapter. All right, so just go ahead and get your guys' vocabulary words done. And hopefully the contextual clues from the reading of the book or the reading of the sentences from yesterday are helping you guys to have a firm understanding of what those vocab words mean. And so, yeah, we'll go ahead and get you guys' assignment tomorrow. So be ready to write a summary for tomorrow. And we will have a question for you guys, a critical thinking question as well. All right, so I will be seeing you guys tomorrow. All right, bye.